Yeah, okay. Good morning. It's a bright and hopeful Saturday morning. The world and India has plunged into absolute uncertainty. The stock markets have crashed, oil prices are going down, and the one positive side is the pollution levels are down as well. The industry and all businesses are relooking on how to revisit disruption and look at new business models. The world is truly and certainly a very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. In short, a VUCA world. Today, in our midst, to understand this a little more, we have Mr. Rishabh Chopra, an entrepreneur and founder par excellence, who's established a global marketing digital company, Transformative Learning Solutions. And Mr. Rishabh Chopra would help us understand it from a perspective of a VUCA world and a digital perspective, which becomes all the more important. Welcome, Rishabh. Thank you for your time and
Thank you
welcome
for having me.
to giving us a lot of insights. To begin with, Rishabh, how do you feel the marketing world post what Philip Kotler wrote has changed and evolved in a VUCA world?
Well, thank you for having me, Dr. Ayushman, and always uh, very grateful to be associated with IILM in several ways. Mostly, I will speak today from a digital perspective. Our primary businesses are in skincare or FMCG brands, run only online, and but run globally. So we run basically what you call digitally native, vertically integrated brands. Biggest sector in skincare today, a little bit in education, and all under the paradigm of Ayurveda. So most of the perspectives I'll give are from the digital side. So that disclaimer to begin with. And the other thing to begin with, hope everybody is safe, sound, and taking good care in these times. It is a great time to reflect and be able to revise any belief systems, habits we have. So I actually quite enjoy this time of being locked down and give everybody a chance to rebuild some of their belief systems and habits. So to come to your question about Porter, which is quite challenging to put that into a framework. Since 10 years that I've been out of B school, but to do that, I mean, in terms of just going by it in a like post-COVID world, which I guess we are in today, is not a post, but a world that will live with sort of the complications of COVID in one form or the other, is one on assortment, right? I mean, like, I think always it'll be about being relevant to the times and to your audiences in terms of product and the audience you have access to. So specifically for any digital business, I would just focus on the product depending on the audience you already have access to, right? And what is not constrained by any current supply chain. That of course is one. In terms of product design, again, this is very audience dependent, but since resources might be more scarce, people will look for more value, less frills. While keeping appeal, you'll have to be quite prudent in what you do in product design. Packaging could have to be thought a lot, because people are maybe for the first time, with this gravity, being very careful about how something like a virus can exist on a package and how long it can exist on a package. So how we think of packaging will become something far more intense with these sort of complications, right? So I think it's something people will factor in. And if you look at products / services for things like education, otherwise these are transformative times, and a lot of education companies have seen significant amount of growth, so it could be quite positive. In terms of price, and again, I talk purely from a digital perspective. That the great thing about a digital business is you could test price every 2 days, and you could test it on a different audience, and you could test it with significant changes in price because audience A or audience B, you can, or the same kind of audience, you can cut it into two clean buckets and show them both a different price and really come to what your optimal price is. So I would really encourage people to do price testing all the time in a digital world, or for significantly often to see what happens. So some prices might change, but that could be a good thing. You might find a more optimal level where you can expand demand or consumption. And discounting, I think, always has to be saved for only specific occasions, because otherwise you don't see the real benefits of it, right? Then people just think of it as a new normal. So all those things will sort of continue. And coming to the last, place and promotion, I think the place in digital especially is all about audiences, right? And you have to be very thoughtful about what your product or service, which audience is it right for. And it's the real benefit of this world that you can precisely go to that audience, precisely test in a very small budget, precisely target your marketing for that audience. And all those things I can tell you from now 10 plus years in the digital business, several $1 billion of advertising investments, that on the basis of all that research, I can tell you that granularity of audience helps massively. So it's not something you just learn in business school, or that anybody talks about on a webinar. You actually will see greater returns on it. So place in digital or non-digital, audience, honing down to the audience will help, should help. People should focus on it. The digital systems, platforms, Google, Facebook, etc., they can all predict audiences quite well, right? So some bit of trying to figure out who is your audience has gone away, because they predict the audience for you. But there is still many systems which require you to, state an audience. And even on the Googles or the Facebook, if you want more traffic or visitors, you can define audiences and do quite well. So granularity and research around audiences can help, especially help in a time like this where everybody's budgets are going to be very constrained. So you've got to be very right with the audiences where you might get a return on your advertising investment. Of course, the other choice in front of everybody is whether you are a D2C brand, which means that you sell off your own platforms direct to consumers, or whether you go on marketplaces like Amazon or Flipkart, or so one of those. So that again is a choice. That's pretty deep question in itself. I think if you don't want to go very, very deep into the marketing data, I would just stick with the marketplaces. For a good brand, they provide lots of scale quite quickly. I mean, I have personally seen friends, colleagues build even 700, 800, 900 crore revenue businesses in 3-4 years, right? So that's the extent of possibility just on a marketplace, right? So unless you really have some absolute need to build a direct-to-consumer brand, or the deep desire to go and the sort of inclination to go deep into the data to build a direct-to-consumer brand, you should go on a marketplace. The benefit of a direct-to-consumer brand absolutely is customer data, closer relationship with the customer, ability to launch new products all the time to your customers. You have far more control of that business, and you sort of control the digital distribution part of it to a significant degree. So that's a choice, but the both places exist, they will exist. And in post-COVID, they may change, like any other place, will be survival of the fittest, the most value creating brands and the most value creating products. But places will remain, the same. And then there's, of course, promotion. I think in promotion, I'll talk more about it, but the summary is creativity never goes away, but sensitivity in a situation becomes very important. you have to be creative but sensitive. And if you are going to be creative plus sensitive, you should be able to get a lot of leverage. Sometimes in a rush, good brands have tried to take advantage of a situation, and respond too quickly, in the sense of putting out a message which was talking about an instance, for example, like an earthquake, and getting the sentiment totally wrong. They try to take a lighter approach to it. The rest of the audience is very shaken by the event, and that can be shaky for a brand. So sensitivity and creativity combined, you'll have a lot of leverage. So it's going to be most of the same rules, just adapt. The messaging has to be adapted for the times.
So that's very interesting. When you're highlighting customer centricity and adapting to the established marketplaces and sensitivity. So what challenges do you anticipate for a lot of companies which did not anticipate transforming very quickly? In fact, how do you make the elephants? Retraining, consumers have to relook at things very differently. And one of the big challenges that I observe across when I look at industries, companies, or when you do an environment scan, the Gen Z and Gen Y and the baby boomers are all very different. So in a lot of places, the leadership is baby boomers, or there could be some talking to Gen Z, and Gen Z is absolutely indifferent to this itself. So what do you anticipate companies will have when looking at transforming and adapting such practices?
Sorry, Dr. Ayushman, it was too shaky, the voice, so I couldn't get the gist of the question.
Yeah. So what challenges do you anticipate when companies look to transform and they look to adapt to an evolving VUCA situation, especially when most of their teams, their marketplaces have been in a non-traditional, non-digital environment? What challenges they need to face?
Well, besides the obvious supply chain challenges that will hopefully get sorted out as fast as they practically can. For a traditional business, I think the initial challenge is going to be shifted to maybe online, and I'm talking about brands, right? Because that's sort of the area of my study. If you haven't been online, you are going to have to suddenly be online, and that will be a challenge, because online requires a certain level of expertise and data understanding to play the game. Lesser if you're on the platforms, but still some degree, and more if you're off the platforms and, for example, you run your own website. So this is can be quite a change for historic large brand, which basically, for example, if somebody's previous sales experience was constructed around an in-store experience, right? So now that in-store experience might be hindered because of social distancing, and now you got to do this online. So that's going to be the challenge. Well, I think the simple messaging, if you of course, it takes a while to develop online skills, but long story, short, some of the basic principles of good marketing will still apply. Good creativity, coherent messaging, ethical messaging, what you say is what your product, etc., does, combined with creativity. And if you develop that great content and messaging, you're likely to do well, I would say, keeping in mind with you have understood the rest of the online market in terms of offering, pricing, value pricing. Because you see the difference between buying in a shop and buying online is, if I go into a shop, I've come into a captive experience, and to some degree, I'm have this great degree of human interaction. So that really can affect the way conversions work. Whereas if I see something online, I within 1 second can check the alternatives, right, to some degree. And maybe in a couple of minutes could have checked the other ones, and I'm not held by some interpersonal physical interaction, right, which is influencing my decision. So that will be maybe the challenge from traditional to going online. Now, when you're now in the rules of online, where that environment is a little bit different, very dependent on your content. But if your content is good, you can do well. Now, even if your content is good, if similar quality products with very good testimonials are available at a much cheaper price, you might have challenges because switching is significantly easier. And so you might have to revise that pretty quickly. But if you follow the metrics and do, the great thing about online is you could be testing every day, right? Your price could be 100 rupees today. You have a competitor whose price is 80 rupees, similar packaging, same product, same testimonials. You may have to shift at 80, maybe you shift to 70, right? But by shifting to 80 or 70, the other thing in online, which is different from offline, is if I have a store in Khan Market, it's limited to the footfall of Khan Market, right? But in online, if I crack the right price where my earning per visitor is the best, I suddenly can scale very fast.
Very interesting. Very
So
interesting.
that adaptation from offline to online might be challenging for the traditionals, but if they go about with the diligence with which they build the offline channel, they will build the online channel. It just has a little bit of different set of rules. Basically, in online, messaging is good, and messaging is right, and price and product strategy is right. Optimizing the conversion is a challenge, but once you optimize the conversion, growth can be in the sort of hockey sticks, right, which go up quite fast.
So when you mentioned that switching can be rampant and quite easy, so are the concepts of CLV, customer lifetime value, are they as relevant, or retention is not as important as getting new customers?
So that's again a very interesting question, because lifetime value and retention are very important. Long story short, because getting new customers even online is more expensive than making a resale to an old customer.
True.
Okay, so that remains, but you are held more accountable much faster. Even in your second product or your third product, you have to be providing value. Okay, I mean, you can see clear cases where massive, well-known global brands have been significant share of their markets in the last couple of years have been taken from incumbent brands 2 or 3 years old, because when the marketplaces were sort of more early on, they pushed a lot of these newer brands for whatever reason, and now the newer brands, because they have testimonials of significant scale, are really eating market share from multinational brands.
Absolutely.
So you have to be able to it is still easier to retain a customer, but in that, like in all kinds of relationship management, if you do not provide continuous value, at some point the relationship will start to fail. And that is like the relationship with your customer. If you're not going to give it best in class value for what economics you take from it, I believe it will start to fail at some point.
So which brands would you say are emerging as benchmark leaders, brands which we should learn from at this stage? Some brands which are doing activities which are significantly different are taking the first mover advantage, or brands which are adapting very quickly.
Okay, so I might take some examples which are from a more biased by friends I know and common to portfolio companies of venture capital firms or investors in us. But these are well known and good brands now. You might have heard of Boat, right? Yeah. The earphone brand. Aman and I went to B school together many years back, and we have the same fund, Fireside, invested in us. And in a very short period of time, we built a massive brand, right? I think that is one to go by, and mostly marketplaces, but great branding, both on the product and in kind of influencers they've used and the messaging they've done, and how they worked with some, serious celebrity endorsements, etc. But a very short period of time shows you how you can build a phenomenal brand. And then I think other very good examples of, if you look at Vadam Teas, which built a global tea brand in a very short period of time against mostly marketplaces. You have yoga bars, which built a great snacking brand over the last couple of years. All signable brands, and also you could see. And I'm talking mostly India focused because I guess that's what consumers would know, right? And I'd also say, Mama Earth built a very large, sizable scale brand in a short period of time using both Amazon and sort of marketplaces and a little bit of digitally native as well. So you can see all these brands in their sectors, whether it be electronic, audio/electronics, whether it could be real consumer like tea or FMCG. They've made a sizable dent in pretty early market because really reach to the millennials, use the digital channels. We've been pretty focused on the digital channels and build very good. I mean, most of these brands have very good content aesthetics. Are very good content aesthetics. I'd similarly say, like, we have built on our end about 2 brands in the US in the last 2.5 years. In last 2.5 years, more than 200,000 customers, right, in the US, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. So I give full credit to my team for building those brands. So we have a brand called Ayura, which is in Ayurvedic skincare, and Ajara, which is also an Ayurvedic skincare. Ajara existed from before, but sort of we scaled it up in the last few years. But Ayura in less than 2.5 years, 200,000 odd sort of customers. So this is, I mean, I would say with our brands or with all of the other sort of friends or portfolio colleague brands I mentioned, it's really the quality of messaging and quality of content that has got them to become, scale up pretty quickly. Now, I think the challenge that will be for all of us is, so I think the one thing is that, and everybody should believe this, and if there are students watching, you should believe this. It's not, it is absolutely possible to build a significant size brand in 3 or 4 years, maybe even 2. I would like to say even 1, and you can, but I don't want to give anybody unrealistic expectations, right? So making a, I don't want to give some number, but let's say several 100 crore brand in 3 or 4 years is an absolute possibility in today's age. Happens all the time. Not easy, but happens all the time. So the point is, from a revenue perspective, you can always do it. The point otherwise, though, is that now you come to a point of retention, right? So it cannot only be about brand, messaging, content, etc. Ultimately, you have to have great quality product. And if you don't have that great quality product, the cohorts will stop to show. If the cohorts stop showing, effectively, what's going to happen is that you will keep having to acquire new customers. Advertising costs will always be rising, right? And if advertising cost is always rising, you're never going to have free cash flow.
Absolutely.
Significantly. And if you don't have free cash flow, ultimately you
Absolutely.
It's going to be a tiring run. And I'll tell you the flip side. The flip side of an environment where you can scale fast, and I know we're talking very optimistic even with COVID around, but I still, I am still at that optimistic because in digital, still people will see scale. People will be at home, maybe, but internet usage will be larger. You'll get more impressions served. So some part of demand will shift online, more will shift online, right? So while you can scale a business fast, don't get so excited by revenue that you forget about the fact that if the same customer is not buying again and again, life is going to be tough later on. So you'll feel a real high for a couple of years, but you'll enter a funny cycle after that. And that is, I think, something to think about. We have to build sustainable consumer interaction.
Oh, very interesting. And since we have a large part of student audience listening, what do you think are the skill sets that hard skills students must develop to be at the front of the race in such scenarios? What kind of skill set should they start working on?
So I think that the skill set, again, I talk a lot from digital, and now skill sets, I'm guessing we want to talk about digital marketing, right? Because that's probably most of the people who are on this. Some of the skills in, of course, brands or FMCG or direct to consumer are product based. So either you have to build product skills, whatever your product might be. So purely on the marketing side or the management side, one, you have to choose whether you're going to be on the creative side or whether you're going to be on the analytical side. And I briefly divide them into those two sides, creative or analytical, right? And if you are going to be on the creative side, it is about just how creative you can be while be ethical in your messaging, what you say about your product does that. You must have that coherence, you must have that consistent message. So creativity is the skill, but with some degree of discipline. I mean, I for years have argued creativity doesn't mean you just have no discipline, right? But yes, creativity is very important because, and I will now try to explain why it is important, right? Because in the digital universe, if you have great content, you will have the lowest cost of distribution or the lowest cost of customer acquisition. If you have the best content, it will be viral. If you have some degree of good content, you will still get a better return for every impression you show online. Okay, and hence the creativity is so important. That creativity will actually translate into much better economics. Then there's the if you're not going to be the creative side, you're going to be on the analytical side. On the analytical side, it's all about how deeply you have learned to read several kind of data. So on the analytical side, I have only, I have highly encouraged being geeky, highly encouraged being quite, heavily studying all digital analytics courses, studying the platforms, Google, Facebook, operating on them. Very important that is becoming is attribution. It's a little bit of more complex subject, but basically, which channel do you attribute your success to? Is your sale, you might be getting visits from many channels, but where is actually your sale happening from? Or which channels are actually having influence on sale? So studying analytics, studying digital advertising, studying attribution, once you have done all the basics, you might be 1.5 years away from attribution or 1 year plus away from understanding attribution well. That would be of great value, if you can, because I believe the analytical side is just like being a good investor, right? Everybody can be an investor because everybody can spend money on Google and Facebook. It's like everybody can buy a stock on the stock market. But to understand how the trends work, understand how all the platforms operate, how you bring them together, understanding the ecosystem, this is a matter of at least a couple of years of research and granularity. And you have to go very deep. I mean, I would say 15-hour days all the time. And yeah, I mean, the more you do that, I think the faster your chance to success. I mean, any of the successful brands I spoke about, I mean, early, the ones I know better, I don't know any of them who's not working insane hours.
Yeah.
I mean, keeping up with building a business which has hundreds of thousands of customers, or let's say even 50 or 100,000 customers adding every year, is very demanding. I mean, it's not like customers are just going to buy a product and not hold you accountable.
Absolutely. Customer acquisitions are very, very critical. In fact, we have a lot of students who are sending us questions, so I'm picking up some of them considering our time. So one of the questions which seems interesting is, how do you actually end up doing segmentation when we at various places? Typical demographics, is it psychographic behavior, or any other key aspects one should look at for segmentation?
I didn't hear the complete question, but basically I heard about segmentation, right?
Yeah. So how does on the digital space? How does one do segmentation in the digital space?
Segmentation, right? Yeah, I mean, the benefit of the digital space is you can do segmentation down to the T. I mean, you could segment by audience, gender, age group, location, all of those. And to a pretty significant degree, you should do them, right? The more you do, the more successful you're likely to be. With two things for you to keep in mind. There is a cost of creative or asset creation. So you have to, when you create a creative or an asset of significant quality, to recover that sort of cost, it should be at least applicable to certain scale, because your segment today can be as small as 1,000 people audience on Facebook. But you advertise to 1,000 people audience on Facebook, you can get only 2 clicks a day. And e-commerce average global conversion rates are like 2.2%. So you could take like 50 days to make a sale on average, right? And you can't keep kind of a sale is worth, let's say, 1,000 rupees or something. The cost of asset creation will be larger. So with the practicality of the asset should be on a certain degree of segment, knowing that, but otherwise absolutely must segment and segment to granularity, and you can do that to a significant degree. The other sort of disclaimer to take in place is, at least what the large platforms advise, the smaller you make a segment, the better they can optimize themselves, because they can learn and find the customers within it. For a long time, I was a critic of that theory and was not sure whether they really did it that way. But in the recent data, I just have seen it tends to be more true than not.
Okay.
You need at least some degree of audience size. If there is some degree of audience size, they can do a little bit. Their automations work better.
Al Rice and Jack Trout used to talk about positioning, and positioning which was everlasting. So is a positioning statement, or a brand positioning statement, BPS as it is called, is it still very relevant? Or, as you mentioned some time back, positioning, pricing, these things are very adaptive now. So what is your view on that?
I think pricing can be significantly adaptive. You have to have some level of comparative to your competitors. I would think so, right? Given whatever bracket of brands you like, if you're in luxury or if you're in value, you have to be somewhere in the bands, or not being in the bands will have some influence on you. But positioning is a different matter. You could have some contextual positioning, which I think is absolutely relevant. And even the largest brands in the world use even automated devices to do contextual positioning. You might see an ad in Chicago and an ad in New York. It might be the same ad, but it will either say Chicago or New York, right? Or it will adapt it a little bit. But the broad positioning of a brand ultimately has to have a significant degree of consistency also, right? I mean, I think one of the best lines of former Nokia CEO, I think, by the name of Mr. Shiva Kumar, when I was at ISB, said, what is a brand? And a brand is a time-saving device. that. And I thought that was the best ways to summarize a brand, that it's a time-saving device. I think it is a particular brand. Hopefully it's Ayura, which is our brand, but whether it be Nike or anybody else's, if it is Nike and is reliable for, good quality footwear and long-lasting product, or, at least you don't have those sort of doubts. And that, so, in our positioning, for example, in our brand, Ayura is like authentic, effective skincare. Now how can authentic, effective Ayurvedic skincare ever be a bad positioning? I mean, you can't be, nobody wants inauthentic and ineffective, right? So those consistent and generally people are okay with some degree of price premium on those things as long as they can be showed of effectivity, show of authenticity. They'll be okay with a little bit of price premium on those grounds. So I think, of course, positioning continues to be important, and the core tenets need to be relevant at least for a very long period of time.
Okay. So one more question. You mentioned sensitivity to the audience. So how does one build empathy to the influencing audience and the consumer audience? Because both of them could be very different. Zomato is a site, is a setup which actually influences, has testimonials. The consuming audience could be very different. So how does one build empathy towards being sensitive to the consumer and really understanding them? So how does one practice it? What tools should one use?
Well, the one thing is you've got to read what consumer says, right? So for example, in our systems, on our sites, I have it set up that any low rating comes to me directly, and I actually don't see high ratings, which are majority of the ratings, because I want to focus on seeing the problems and solving the problems, right? So you can set up your systems in many ways, both for looking, but broadly, how do you sense what the consumers want? And so, and people shouldn't miss this. If you want the messaging right, you might have to read the 300 Facebook comments on your Facebook ad to understand what's happening, or the comments on your webinar or otherwise. You have to make it contextual to the largest set of consumers, because sometimes I see people will, but you have to be fairly balanced and data centric about that view. I mean, when you're dealing with hundreds and thousands of people, which is like with any internet business, you are going to have, several divergent views. But what is the macro view, and what is the macro sentiment? What is the macro feeling? And that will need the reading it requires. And if the sense today, for example, practical example is people could say, oh, is your packaging actually, how long will the virus lie on your packaging, etc. You might have to alter the packaging to make sure that concern is met, or you might have to communicate very clearly that this is cardboard, lasts only 24 hours, is taken care of, all social distancing in our warehouses is taken care of. And by the time we ship to you, we contactless delivery. You have to address the concern, which is the process of understanding it well and then addressing it well, right? But you have to sort of do that. So for example, in the last 20 days, usually on weekends, we have sales sort of promotions or emails going on. We have almost done anything, none of them, I think, in the last 15 or 20 days, because seems a bit odd, right? 18,000, we're mostly in America, 18,000 Americans dying and saying, hey, please buy our next skincare.
Absolutely.
So we have an education business also, where we sell Ayurvedic educational courses with Ayurvedic practitioners and Ayurvedic doctors. So for example, this week we had 1,500 people sign up for two webinars with one of our partners, who's a Harvard-trained MD, talking about immunity, right? So that's more relevant to these times, and we had a 50% attendance rate, lots of interaction, because this is people's current this is what they want currently. We had about 8,000 people sign up for taking an educational course, a paid educational course, in the last 45 days. So because now people are, health is front of mind, right? So that's a big change. And so sensitivity can still have good outcomes even for business, right? But ultimately you have to serve the value that the consumer wants, right? That's people just want the value to address their current problems. And that's all I think we mean by sensitivity.
Absolutely. No, it's been fantastic listening to you today, Rishabh. Any words of advice you would have for a student audience who's listening and, you know, they're asking questions, but words of advice on how they should really prepare themselves for a world which will not be the same anymore?
I'm quite optimistic. So maybe that's not, I haven't gone deep enough, but I think a lot of things hopefully will return to normal, and there might be some more distancing, etc. But ultimately, every valuable category of product has to continue to exist, right? And valuable categories are consumed for the need. So I would say my advice to students would be to really focus on the future. Be glad you're studying at this time and not out in the job. So you will probably miss a lot of the cycle anyways, right? The economics should not influence you. Might be harder on your parents to pay your college fees. So be more grateful for them every day. But besides that, I would say, I just think people should believe, and I tell some of the younger people in our office that it is really today possible in 4 or 5 years to build fantastic, sizable businesses with significant size economic outcomes. And really in 5 years tops, 3 to 5 years. And my advice would be, but that is only possible if you're really ready to put a lot in. And you should not mistake that it's easy. You should be ready to put a lot in. So this time, whether it's at home or otherwise, go deep into the learning cycle, right? You have to be learning very fast. You have to be learning something is very relevant. And you also have to be careful who you learn from. I think one of the best abilities the internet gave us was it gave all of us the access to listen to the best people in the world, right? And so you have the access to listen to the best investors, the best internet entrepreneurs. So start from the top, right? Don't start from the bottom. Like maybe you should have been listening to me today, and you should have first made sure you had exhausted every piece of content of all the greatest internet entrepreneurs, because then your mindset will start functioning at that level, right? And that I think is our greatest gift. That, can you imagine 10 years back or 15 years back, we were limited to the information of the people around us, or limited till some great entrepreneur got free from his business and wrote a book. I mean, today, a lot of their content or their company speeches or other speeches are public. Geek out in them. And at an early stage in your life, you'll be able to see how the best people think. And, that will reform the way you think. And if you work crazy hard, it'll be unbelievable to you, but believe it's possible that you can build a really sizable business within 5 years. Just be ready to work 15 hours a day and have very few Sundays. So that is my core advice to you. Go for it.
Oh, absolutely wonderful, Rishabh. In fact, it's been an amazing masterclass for all of us, trying to listen to things which work and how to crystal gaze into the future. And I thank you on behalf of all our audience which has been listening. Thank you so much for your time. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and listening from you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks so much, Ayushman. Always grateful to the whole community at IILM.
Thank you. Thank you so much.